Mr. Speaker, firstly, let me congratulate you for your election to speakership of this honorable House. At the same time, if you will permit me, I will wish to also extend my greatest sympathy to the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Cathy. We've been friends for a while, and indeed it was a tragic accident. And also, it is very refreshing for me to also welcome back the Honorable Member, Dr. Jagdeo. Mr. Speaker, the budget speech is devoid of reference to the indigenous people and merely offer a passing reference to hinterland. There is no genuine recognition of a group of people who have contributed greatly to our beautiful country, its culture, arts, also its social and economic makeup. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that the indigenous people were the first people to arrive here, and therefore, with not an iota of significant reference to them, this very important group in the budget, I believe, is an oversight. And if it's not an oversight, then it's a blatant, deliberate act to keep us in the background. Mr. Speaker, failing to provide genuine recognition to Amerindians is, for me, as I speak on behalf of the Amerindians, like all my other indigenous brothers and sisters who occupy seats in this parliament, and I am sure this occurrence has dulled our expectation with respect to the budget of 2015. Mr. Speaker, it is a PPP budget. Most of the proposals contained in this budget are rolled over projects and initiatives that this PPP Civic had not only on paper, but many of them were in progress. And therefore, changing names and changing project title is not going to do us well. And I will mention my friend words in this House, Honorable Cathy Hughes, Minister of Tourism. She said, maybe not in the same words, but that this is the time for us to work together. And she even pointed out the stakeholders that can work together to move this country forward. And therefore, we must be fair to the Guyanese nation. We must not be only egoistic to say that this is yours and this is mine. Comrades and friends and honorable members in this House, that budget actually is a rollover from the People's Progressive Party when we were in government. And then therefore, we will obviously give credit to the success of that budget when we experience the achievements as targeted and contained in this budget. Mr. Speaker, because the budget makes reference, not to achieving much of what it says. It keeps repeating all the time that in the next 5 years, by 2020, this sends a signal to this nation that we're not serious, that the budget, despite the good projects that are contained in the speech, or the proposal contained in the speech, if we are not careful, will remain rhetoric. Rhetoric, as much as we look at this fresh approach to a good life. If rhetoric is the fresh approach, then I believe that all the electors of this country should be fearful. We should be fearful, because rhetoric will not take us. We will not advance with rhetoric. Mr. Speaker, I was listening to my honorable friend on the other side of the House, on the government side, and I admire Honorable Dawn Hastings. I admire her. And I believe that the APNU and the AFC together commit a grave oversight again. That is, I expected that the lineup of vice presidents would have had at least one woman, one female. Mr. Speaker, and my choice for vice president in Dawn Hastings would have been a very fitting position for her. Mr. Speaker, Dawn Hastings she just displayed the level of discipline, the level of merit to also have been the Minister of Indigenous Affairs. Mr. Speaker, and it's not only about her discipline and her ability to demonstrate in this House. Mr. Speaker, Dawn Hastings won her region. She worked hard and she won her region. And it was also an oversight. It was also an oversight. It was also an oversight that she was appointed only after long consideration. And she was appointed to a position which she will do well. She will do well. It's not patronizing, it's speaking the truth. Speaking the truth.
Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, the PPP Civic has
Honourable Member, I will ask you not to leave the chair out of your presentation, but to address the chair. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the People's Progressive Party Civic has left a legacy of success that is now inherited by those sitting on the government benches. Mr. Speaker, in the indigenous sector, we have left a list of transformative projects which I will be watching very closely on how they proceed to implement these projects. Mr. Speaker, I'm already appalled at the way and the treatment that they have meted out to the Tushau's. Mr. Speaker, I have a very good relationship with Tushau's. And last Wednesday, when the National Tushau's executive, just a handful of them, were notified to come to the ministry to discuss NTC meeting, comrades, Mr. Speaker, they did not have the opportunity to even have an audience with the Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, who is an ex-official member of that executive. Mr. Speaker, I consider the NTC conference, which is taking place now and for the next couple of days, to be an illegal conference. And I'll tell you why. Honorable Yvonne Pearson has already outlined the legalities of how it's illegal. But I'll tell you what. I will tell you what. Mr. Speaker, the bastion and the virtuous who always speak about consultation deny one of the greatest opportunity for consultation. Mr. Speaker, they did not even give the Tushos 1 week notice. The Tushos were not even able to meet the community members to provide them with a direction to come to discuss their affairs at the NTC Council. I have heard in every community where Honorable Sydney and others have gone, the first thing they teach the residents is the acronym FPIC. FPIC. And they have thrown FPIC out the window. Mr. Speaker, FPIC is an important component of governance. Very important component of governance. And I expect that the IPA ministry will take good note of that. Mr. Speaker, the NTC must have been going through hell. The NTC must have been going through hell because they could not even set their own agenda. They were dictating an agenda by some advisors. And Mr. Speaker, if it was not for the good relationship, when the Tushaw arrived in town, they indicated that they want to meet with me. And I want to clear this. There was no maneuvering to bring them. I cannot maneuver to bring 130 Tushaws to meet me. They came. They're leaders. They make their own decisions, and we must respect that. We must respect that. If they want to meet the former minister, that is their democratic right. And if the former minister sends them an invitation, indeed, I know that they will come. And if we are to work together to represent indigenous people, then there should be no peddling of mischievous untruth in the media to ensure that we do not embarrass our leadership. Our leadership has that opportunity to make decisions. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister spoke about land. He lifted 2 titles up and tried to create an embarrassment that we issued title without signature. Mr. Speaker, it is because of consultation. It is because of consultation that that matter had occurred. It is because of those other stakeholders who raised the issue about not being fairly treated, and they also have a stake in this country that those titles were held. It was held so that every single stakeholder would be able to validate their claim. Mr. Speaker, it was not that we did not want to give them their titles, but it is because we have consulted and we did not want to make any mistakes that we decided to have a second round of consultation. Mr. Speaker, the Tushars were told It was a public issue, and every single one knew what was happening. And therefore, to bring those old titles to create an embarrassment in this House is a low blow by the Honorable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I will now wish to move on to another issue, another vexatious issue which the Tushau's raised with me. And I looked in the budget to see whether there was any allocation for this matter. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister laid in this House very quickly before the debate started a policy statement. He slipped it in. Mr. Speaker, if it was not the pressure brought to bear by the People's Progressive Party civic government, we would not have had a commitment. We would not have had a commitment to reinstate the 2000 CSO. Change the name as you wish. Change the name as you wish. It is important to understand that we must not put pressure on vulnerable youths, particularly those groups that are looking towards the leaders of this country to represent and support them. Mr. Speaker, this matter of the CSO is a messy one caused by the IPA, because even before they came into office, they did not want to see that young indigenous people shape for themselves a comfortable and good life. They didn't want to do it. In fact, I read a number of media reports by the minister on this issue, and the minister did mention up to very recently that this concept is good on paper, but the operation of it were not as expected. He said that. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you, if the minister believes it's a good concept, what would it have taken for him? He is now in government. He needed to sit down, look at it. He has that latitude to review it and to sharpen the mechanisms and put in place the things that will make that successful to his expectation. Mr. Speaker, you don't play games with young people's future. You do not play games with young people's future. That is why the honorable member, Charles Ramson, earlier in the debate, said you're laughing at the youths now. You're doing anything you want with the youths. But in the next 5 years, many of you will probably be laughed by the young people. Mr. Speaker, the matter that the CSO will now be reinstated does not take away from the difficulty that has been brought to bear on these young people. And I fully support TAMOG and the case that they brought against the government and the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs. I fully support it. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the political will of the leaders who will now be responsible for delivering to the indigenous people. I peruse the budget. As I said, there was just a mere reference to indigenous, but I want to tell you that on record, I need to leave on record a few things. The People's Progressive Party civic government has left an Amerindian Development Fund project which will be funding community development projects to communities across the hinterland And I expect that this $6.7 million US dollars will be used for the benefit of the communities. I will also wish to say that this side also left an ICT project. And I will implore on the minister to use both positions that he now holds to ensure that the hinterland access to internet and the hinterland opportunity for becoming computer literate is followed up. And that you will not sit humbly and apply and sit silently and let it pass you, because in the budget you have already sat silent, because I've heard that the 10,000 that is coming is not going to Amerindians. So I implore you, sitting here today, I'm imploring you to at least request of your government 3,000 of those computers to be put in the hubs that are awaiting to be outfitted with computers. Mr. Speaker, we have also left a very good project which offers economic funding for small projects for the Amerindians, the Presidential Grant Fund. I notice you haven't dropped it, because that funding is very critical to assist the indigenous people to vitalize the economic activities with respect to the resources that exist in every community, including social and physical infrastructure. And since its inception, it has been a visible project where you can pinpoint many of those projects. And if you don't believe me, I think you've traveled and you're now seeing for yourself that it makes sense. And maybe that's why you didn't drop it. The other project I want to ask of you to deal with is the fact that at every NTC, the Tushals come with priorities, because they too have a village development agenda. And when they have finished deliberating on what is the vision for them in the next 3 years or 1 year, you take seriously their request. And every year I will tell you that you should aim to fulfill those requests. It is important for our people. I speak from the opposition benches today, but I have not forgotten how useful governmental intervention, both resource, goods, or even finances, has gone a long way to making our indigenous people live a better life. Mr. Speaker, I need also to say that in the 2015 budget, it lacks policy directives on some of the gaps that still exist. Not gap, but the gaps that exist. For example, I heard some mention about education. I would have liked today for you to lay before this Parliament a number of policy statements, because it's lacking in the budget. It's lacking. For example, you should have been here laying a policy statement to ensure that the hinterland study, which my colleague, Honorable Priya Manikchan, started, is finished early, so that the recommendations and the specifics out of that report should have been able to be in the budget now. And I remind you, if you read the budget, there are some timelines. Every sector set a timeline, targets and objectives they want to attain in 5 years. When I looked at the indigenous, again, you did not even represent a single period of a timeline that you will want to achieve certain things. It took the head of state yesterday to correct some of your silent deficiencies, to go to that conference and outlay to correct the things. And I will say, wisdom is a good thing, because you have now many advisors around you, and don't waste their time. Take whatever they can offer you and put it to use for the indigenous people's development. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the education.
Honourable Member, you have 10 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, mention was made here of the Cato Secondary School, which they claimed is still not completed. Mr. Speaker, they have to start to behave as though they are in government. They have to behave as though they're in government. We don't mind criticism when we were in government, and therefore, I will tell you that the ball is in your court now. You have many children of the North Pacaraimers that would like to occupy that school. And I will ask that you work with the Ministry of Education to get that project up and running. I expected that that project could have been serving our children in September. But instead you have been spending your time deliberately cleansing people who can help you out of in the government. Yes. Mr. Speaker, it is finished, but they need to now put the other things in place, and they could have done it in 3 months. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the fact the budget also is silent on Hinterland Road Network. A few areas were mentioned. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say that our government, when we were on that side, we recognized the need to advance the Hinterland Road Network. And I would like to see that it is not only the responsibility of the other ministries, but that you yourself take keen interest in lobbying and pushing for those roads to be done. For example, everything seems to be nice, as you were saying, but I will tell you, in North Pacaraimers, there are a number of roads that you need to pay attention to. The number of roads that need to be paid attention to. You need to do, for example, the road from Maikwak to Paramakatoy. You need to fix the road from, you're in government now. You're in government now, so you have to fix it. Mr. Speaker, the roads from Maikwak to Paramakatoy needs to be fixed. The road from Maikwak to Kaibaripai needs to be fixed. The road from Kanapang to Cato needs to be fixed. Mr. Speaker, those roads, a lot of investment by this government went into it, and I expect that you, sitting and representing the indigenous constituency, will ensure that those roads get attention. Mr. Speaker, albeit with Region 9, I understand during the campaign, the roads were referred to as biscuit roads. But, Mr. Speaker, the roads are far improved, and I am watching to see how much more improvement will be done in the next 5 years. Sure. Mr. Speaker, the matter of village elections. Village elections in this year was also a mess. It was messy. very messy. This is the first year that we have had, or I have read, of so many complaints about the way the elections were committed. Mr. Speaker, again,
Honourable
I am
member,
saying,
you have 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I am saying that with all the staff that you have now, you need to ensure that you do not make these lapses, because it put pressure on the indigenous people. It put pressure on the indigenous leaders, and it takes away valuable time from them, because it causes a lot of contradictions, and the ministry should be able to provide the level of guidance that they are accustomed to. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I also want to mention that mining and Amerindians, because this was mentioned by Honorable Minister Dawn Hastings, where she noted that the PPP civic government allowed mining to be done in indigenous community. Mr. Speaker, I would advise that the Honorable Minister read the matter on Isineru. Get engaged in learning about that matter. Because the matter of Isineru, it is the indigenous people who are mining. Indigenous people who are mining. The Amerindian Act provided them with a strong tool to make agreements. And I can tell you, at the time of that petition, they only had 4 agreements with non-residents. All the mining that were taking place there were done by residents. And they were hoodwinked to believe that something was wrong, and they were misled into signing a petition that today I understand they will be withdrawing, because they have now realized how misled they were in taking that case. And you speak of Kako, and you speak of Kako. If you enter into Kako's village and you go to the village council office, there's a large chart which speaks about income and royalties from mining. That
Honourable
chart
member,
is
you have
not
2 minutes remaining.
That chart is not written by anyone from the ministry or from the then government, the PPP civic government. It is managed and controlled by the village council. The mining in the Cameron River, Jowala, for example, the only river dredge mining there is the brother of the former Tushao, who just demitted office. And therefore, when you want to talk about mining and environment as it relates to indigenous people, you have to understand that you take away mining from them, and what happens? If you take away mining from them, what happens? It means that you will have to ask the Honorable Finance Minister for further financial allocation to make intervention to stabilize the village economies of the indigenous people. Mr. Speaker, today I may be speaking from the opposition bench on behalf of the People's Progressive Party. However, I want to say that the People's Progressive Party civic remains the largest partnering and engaging indigenous people, and we will stand firm to represent them. We will stand firm to continue to not only represent indigenous people, but we will represent this nation. And someone said, not for long. because the winnings which you so gleefully clapped and thumped about is very questionable. That is why the People's Progressive Party civic government has moved.
Honourable Member, you have a minute to wrap up.
That is why the People's Progressive Party civic government has moved to institute a legal case with respect, a legal petition with respect to the results. And I will tell you that a slim majority may mean the winnings for you, but that does not take away the fact that we have won almost as equal as you, and we will do our job on this side. Region 8, Region 8, if we had the recount, we would have taken Region 8, not only at the regional election, but at the national general election. I thank you.